Do you ever see a really trendy but expensive home decor piece online and you're just like, I could make that? That's what I'm doing today. I am going to turn a simple, plain cereal box into this bookend vase. I saw something very similar to this online made out of actual ceramic, but I was just like, that's a simple enough shape. I think I can make it out of cardboard. So let me show you how to do it. Begin by cutting off the tabs at the top of your cereal box. We're not gonna need those. And then carefully open up the cereal box and turn it inside out and glue it back together. Having the cardboard on the outside is just going to make it a lot easier to paint later on. So now that the box is turned inside out, we're ready to actually start the project. Grab this pattern, which I sized to be 6 inches wide because that's the width of my box. If your box is a different size, you would need to scale the pattern up or down. So I'm just going to cut this out. Now I'm just going to trace it on one side of the box and then flip over the box and flip over the pattern and trace it on the other side. So double check that it is facing the same way on both sides, and then we're going to cut this out. But we're going to leave tabs on the sides right here, like basically 2 lines coming down the side. It'll be easier to see once I actually cut it out. All right, so here's what it's supposed to look like. You can see that our main shape is fully separated from the sides, and then the sides each have these tabs on the side of them. So now we're just going to cut lines into these tabs, and that is what's going to allow us to bend the sides to follow the curve of that shape we just cut. And now carefully, and this is probably the trickiest part of the whole thing, we're just going to apply glue onto the tabs and then glue the sides in place, following that curve that we just cut. So once I have the bottom of this shorter side glued, you can see that we have a little bit too much up here. So I'm just going to cut this. Hang on to this because we're going to need it for the other side. And then I'm just going to finish gluing this short side. So now that this side is fully glued, you can see how nice that's looking. But if we take a look at this side, you can see that when we bend it up this curve, it's not quite long enough to make it all the way to the top. So we're gonna take this piece that we cut off and we're just going to cut off the bottom tab on each side. Now we can just glue that in place to extend this side. So there is our basic vase shape. I think that's looking so good. For the next step, I want to add a piece up here to the opening. So I cut another piece of cardboard off of another food container. And just like before, it's easier to show you what we're making after I've already done it. So I'm going to make it and then I'll show you what we're doing. Okay, so here is the shape that I made. It's basically a large outline of a rectangle with these tabs on all four sides, and this will insert right into the opening to basically extend this out and make the walls look thicker than they are. So I'm going to just glue that in place. So that is our basic cardboard shape finished. I think that's looking so good. All I'm going to do now is grab some sandpaper and just go over all of the edges to kind of smooth them down, soften them up. So we just have one more thing to add before we start painting. I got these wooden rings and I'm just going to use my saw to cut off the bottom so that we have an arc rather than a full circle. Once you get down about halfway, the wood is soft enough that you can just break off that piece. So now you can see that the angles at the end of the ring aren't quite right, so it's not sitting flush against the container. So I'm just going to use sandpaper to sand those down. So once you have them sanded, you can just glue them in place. And there we go. There is our vase looking great. The only thing left to do is give it a coat of paint. So I'm going to be using this terracotta color because we're trying to mimic the look of clay. So just pour out a nice generous amount. And then here is our secret ingredient. We're going to add a little bit of baking powder, and that's going to make the paint completely matte and give it a little bit of texture. So you can see that as the baking powder is added, the paint sort of expands and becomes really fluffy. So this is the texture that we're going for. So go ahead and do 2 coats of paint over the entire thing. Make sure that you also paint inside the vase at the top where you can see in, and you might want to use a smaller brush to really get in there. And once you add the baking powder, the paint dries really fast. So by the time you finish going over the whole thing, you can circle back around to where you started to add a second coat. And on the second coat, I really tried to glop it on there to add a lot of texture to try to cover up any spots where it's obviously cardboard and try to make it look a little bit more like ceramic. So once the paint is dry, we have our finished bookend vase. Now, if you're going to be using this as a bookend, obviously it will need to be much heavier. It is very lightweight right now. So I'm going to fill up the bottom with these rocks that I have left over from a different project. You can use anything small and heavy like this that you have. And then obviously you should only put fake plants in here because water and cardboard do not mix. So I got this at the craft store and I think it perfectly encapsulates the kind of boho vibe that I'm going for. So these aren't perfect, but I think it's a pretty good dupe, and we made them out of really inexpensive supplies. Plus, this is a great option if you want to sort of try out a trendy item before you commit to actually buying it. So I'd love to know in the comments if you would make one out of your old cereal boxes. Don't forget to like this video and to subscribe to Handmade for new DIY videos every single week. And I will see you all in the next one.